What keeps species from blending into one another? Why don't lions and tigers naturally form hybrids in the wild? How does nature ensure that species remain distinct? The answer lies in reproductive isolation, the powerful force that prevents different species from interbreeding. In today's video, we'll explore the mechanisms of reproductive isolation, how they shape the tree of life, and their role in the grand process of speciation, the formation of new species. Section 1. What is reproductive isolation? Reproductive isolation is the key factor that keeps species separate. It prevents genes from mixing between different species, ensuring that they evolve independently. This isolation can occur before fertilization, pre-zygotic mechanisms, or after fertilization, post-zygotic mechanisms. These barriers operate at different levels to prevent the creation of hybrid offspring. Let's dive into pre-zygotic mechanisms first. Section 2. Pre-zygotic isolating mechanisms. Pre-zygotic isolation happens before a zygote is formed. There are 5 major types. Number 1, ecological isolation. Even though lions and tigers are capable of producing hybrids in captivity, they don't interbreed in the wild because they live in different habitats. This is an example of ecological isolation, when species occupy different environments and never meet. Number 2, temporal isolation. Some species may live in the same place, but reproduce at different times. A real-world example is the Pinus radiata and the Pinus muricata, 2 pine tree species that share a habitat but release their pollen in different months, preventing crossbreeding. Number 3, behavioral isolation. Many species rely on unique behaviors to find mates. If another species doesn't recognize these signals, they won't mate. A great example is fireflies, which use specific flashing patterns to attract mates. Females will only respond to the pattern of their own species. Number 4, mechanical isolation. Even if 2 species try to mate, sometimes their reproductive structures just don't fit. This is mechanical isolation, where structural differences prevent successful mating. A good example is the monkey flower species, where one is pollinated by bumblebees and the other by hummingbirds, ensuring they don't cross-pollinate. Number 5, gametic isolation. Even if mating occurs, fertilization might fail due to gametic isolation. In marine environments, species like sea urchins release sperm and eggs into the water, but only sperm with the right molecular signals can fertilize the eggs of the same species. Now, what happens if the pre-zygotic isolation fails and species do manage to produce hybrids? That's where post-zygotic mechanisms come in. Section 3. Post-zygotic isolating mechanisms. If pre-zygotic barriers don't stop interbreeding, post-zygotic mechanisms ensure that hybrids don't thrive or reproduce. There are 3 main types. Number 1, hybrid inviability. Some hybrids inherit incompatible genes from both parents, preventing them from developing properly. For example, when sheep and goats mate, fertilization occurs, but the embryo never develops due to mismatched gene instructions. Number 2, hybrid sterility. Even if hybrids survive, they may be sterile. A classic example is the mule, a cross between a horse and a donkey. Horses have 64 chromosomes, donkeys have 62, and mules end up with 63, making them incapable of producing offspring. Number 3, hybrid breakdown. Sometimes the first-generation hybrids are viable and fertile, but their offspring, at the F2 generation, suffer from genetic issues. This is hybrid breakdown, ensuring that even if hybrids reproduce, their lineage doesn't continue for long. With these mechanisms in place, nature ensures that different species stay distinct over time. But how does reproductive isolation lead to the formation of new species? Section 4. The geography of speciation. Ernst Mayr, a leading evolutionary biologist, identified 2 main types of speciation based on geography. Number 1 is allopatric speciation, when geography divides. Allopatric speciation happens when a physical barrier, like a river, mountain, or ocean, separates populations, preventing gene flow. Over time, genetic differences accumulate, leading to the formation of new species. A real-world example is the uplift of the Isthmus of Panama, which separated marine populations into the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, eventually leading to the evolution of closely related but distinct species on either side. Number 2, sympatric speciation, when speciation happens without separation. Sometimes species evolve new traits that create reproductive isolation within the same habitat. A great example is the apple maggot fly, originally living on hawthorn trees, but some shifted to apple trees, forming two distinct populations that rarely interbreed. Polyploidy, where species gain extra sets of chromosomes, is another driver of sympatric speciation, particularly in plants. Conclusion: reproductive isolation is the invisible force shaping biodiversity. Whether through prezygotic or postzygotic barriers, nature ensures species remain distinct, and over time, this leads to the formation of new species through speciation. Understanding these mechanisms help us grasp the complexity of evolution and the incredible diversity of life on Earth. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more fascinating insights into the world of biology. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.